Hello and welcome back to 100 Yards of Football, Sports Talk Radio. I'm your producer, Jeremiah Long, and joining me to talk about Willie Davis, a absolute legend from the Green Bay Packers and from Grambling State University, is our two hosts, Mr. Harper LeBel and Vincent Turner. How's it going, guys?
How you doing this morning, Mr. Jeremiah Long?
I'm doing so great, man. And when I see two legends themselves talk about football on the field, about the stats, keeping it about the history, keeping it about the exact stats from where they came from, not worrying about any of the drama that goes on some of those other shows, and just keeping it about like interesting, knowledgeable sports. And thousands of episodes like that, historical ones you could watch anytime. That's just a lot of things I love about our show. And so, when I'm on the backside producing the show and I hear you, Mr. Harper LeBel, was an NFL legend in your own right, talking about the in-depth knowledge about someone like Willie Davis, who everyone may know the top line story about, but y'all are about to like dig in. That's just, one of the joys I get from producing the show. And, Vincent, we've been doing this show together for many years. And over that time, I have got to know that on a certain Wednesday, or a certain Sunday most likely, you were wearing a certain shirt and you were watching a certain game and you saw a specific play. And I have heard over and over again how you have this like whip memory about the way those connections worked and how it related to your life at the time, what you were doing in your life. And I just got to give it up to you, man, because those moments in the show, and I know that a lot of our viewers have, given us a lot of information back and said the same thing. That type of information is something that sets our show apart. And I really appreciate just the work that y'all do. So Willie Davis, like you will be done right today by these, young gentlemen here, I believe. So Harper, just with that, I want to give it over to you.
Well, thank you, Jeremiah. William Delford Davis was born on July 24th, 1936, long time ago. And you would not know much about him had he not been an NFL legend. And even afterwards, a difference maker. And we want to bring that out today. We want to share some of the important things about this man and his life and what his influence was, not only on the game, not only amongst the NFL itself, the Green Bay Packers, of course, but throughout the business community. We'll talk about that a little bit. But William Delford, Willie Davis, man, what a great player he was. He wore number 87 with the Green Bay Packers. That's where most people will remember him. 5-time champion with the Packers, 2 Super Bowl wins. You're looking on the right there, the picture of him looking after Lenny Davis, just trying to get a hold of him. The picture below with Daryl LaMonica, that's from Super Bowl II. This guy was an amazing defensive football player and a star in the NFL for a decade with the Green Bay Packers. But it didn't start there. Lisbon, Louisiana was where he was born, and then he moved to Texarkana. He played at Booker T. Washington High School, Vincent, back in the day. We don't have a whole lot of stats from his high school, but as we mentioned with Willie Brown, he catches the eye of a coach, a legendary coach at Grambling named Eddie Robinson, early on in Eddie's career, and becomes a Grambling State Tiger, and there things started to change for Willie.
When I first heard of Willie Davis, I always think about the 1955 Orange Blossom Classic, the Florida A&M game against Grambling. It was the national championship game for the HBCUs. And you had 2 outstanding running backs for Florida A&M. I know everyone out there who's listening today, Willie Gallimore and Al Frazier, and coached by the legendary Jay Gaither. Well, they played Grambling State that evening, and the best player on the field was Willie Davis, by none. And then I went on with my research, and I remember a story that his head coach, Eddie Robinson, told about Willie Davis. He said, number one, when Willie Davis got on campus as a freshman, maybe Harper, you can relate to this. He said Willie Davis was a thumper at the defensive end position. Now, I don't know exactly what a thumper means, but Eddie Robinson said that it meant breaking headgear. And the most telling story that Eddie Robinson said about Willie Davis, we had him lined up in practice at the defensive end position. And I had to cancel practice because he at least hurt 8 players on a man-to-man drill. That's when he knew Willie Davis was very special. And another thing I want to bring up, and you brought up just a few minutes ago, Harper, about you kind of led, I want to say, let everybody know that we're going to mention his exploits off the field as far as from the academics. Don't you know when he was at Grambling, he was on the dean list every semester? He made A's and B's, and I think in his college career at Grambling, he only made 4 B's. But getting on to the fact is that he was drafted in the 15th round in the 1956 NFL draft. You had Forrest Gregg, you had the great Lenny Moore out of Penn State, you had Oral Morrow out of Michigan State, and you had the great Sam Huff. But I'm trying to think, how does he fall all the way to the 15th round in the 1956 draft? Then he get drafted by the Cleveland Browns. And then after that, I believe played a season, maybe you can help me, Harper, and then he served 2 years in the military. Then he was traded on July 12, 1960. 3 days before 5 days before I was born, and his life changed. And when you look at Willie Davis' career, again, you got to give kudos to the great legendary Eddie Robinson. Look at the 2 players that we highlighting today on 100 yards of football, Willie Brown and Willie Davis, and how they impacted the league. Back to you, Harper.
You know, you mentioned some things. There's a lot there in that. There's some great nuggets. When you mentioned his academics, he studied mathematics and industrial arts while he was at Grambling. But consider just for a moment, put that off to the side. Academics was very important to him. He played on some great teams. In 1955, they were undefeated. He was a black college All-American. He played guard and linebacker as well as tackle and defensive end from 1952 to 55 in Grambling. And he played well enough. You did mention that he was drafted in the 15th round by Cleveland. There wasn't the same type of technology. You know, the film study, the ability to watch games, and to be able to go and access some just wasn't the same. So you would see a lot of players from the bigger schools get selected first. And once they got into training camp, that's when the difference was. And you talk about a guy that's a thumper, man, that young man will hit you, and he'll hit you hard. David Robinson, the linebacker for the Packers, a teammate of Willie, said, you know what? He doesn't have the strongest legs. He can run, but he doesn't have the strongest legs. But from the chest up, he's as strong as anybody in the league. He was 6'3", 245 pounds, which today would be considered to be probably below average for a lineman, especially just at the high school age these days. But back then, he was a man amongst men. And he served 2 years in the military after being drafted in 1956. The 58 was his first year in Cleveland, and he played well there. He played tackle. He was in the era that they still went both ways. So defense, he was also on the line. But he was saddened to the point where it really bothered him when Cleveland decided to trade him to Green Bay. Now, things changed when he got to meet Vince Lombardi. But at the time, it was really a disappointing experience for him. He wanted to stay in Cleveland. He had a great respect and love. He was playing for Paul Brown, so I can imagine that his football IQ was dramatically increased from what it had been. Anybody getting at a different level. He learned a lot more, obviously, from Eddie Robinson than what he learned in Texarkana. And the growth experience for a guy that's hungry for knowledge, that to me speaks volumes. But he ended up in Green Bay. And how did it turn out for him there? My goodness, 5 championships later. In an era where they didn't count sacks, during the 10 seasons that he was with the Green Bay Packers, he estimated that he was in the teens every single one of those years. And Paul Hornung, his teammate with the Green Bay Packers, the golden boy from Notre Dame, the running back, said, you know, Willie, there was one year where you had 25 sacks. And Willie didn't even know it because, again, it was not a statistic that they kept track of back in those days in the 60s. It wasn't until the late 60s, early 70s that they started to incorporate it. But because they didn't keep stats back in those days, everything was an estimate. And instead of it writing an estimate, they just wouldn't include it. But Willie was an amazing athletic, strong, physical, lightning fast, and smart player that could get to the quarterback. And as you see on the right, he's chasing after Len Dawson. And in the middle, down at the bottom, it's Daryl LaMonica, both of those in the Super Bowls. There are some great things about what he was able to do. But Vincent, your thoughts about when he became a Packer and ended up playing for the great Vince Lombardi?
You think about when he went to Lombardi, how that Green Bay Packers defense changed. And the players that was on that defensive side of the ball, Willie Wood, the man himself, Ray Nitschke, and his partner, Henry Jordan, that was a D tackle. And think about how they dominated. And then I go back to the 1961 NFC Championship where the NFL tied again against the New York Giants, where the Packers ended up winning the game 37-0. And think about what happened in that game where Willie Davis, they said, had an outstanding game, like 4 or 5 sacks, I believe, in that game. Would have been the most MVP in that game if I think Paul Hornung won an award because he scored so many points. Don't recollect. I might be wrong on that. But what really stuck out in my mind, the Giants tried 3 offensive tackles to try to handle him that game. Greg Lawson, Mickey Walker, and Jack Stroud. And as we say here on 100 Yards Football, lane closed. And how Willie Davis dominated that football game. That's when I knew he was special. But then think about this, Harper. In his 12-game-year career, he never missed a game.
Yep.
Playing football back then, can you imagine? Teeth knocked out. The type of hitting that was going on back then, he never missed a game in his 12-year career. And then another point. Somebody from the Kansas City Chiefs said in that Super Bowl that Willie Davis, I don't know, it was one of the Kansas City Chiefs offensive linemen, but they said, man, blocking Willie Davis is like blocking King Kong. King Kong. When you talk about Willie Davis, quick off the ball, agility, dedication, and relentless. Look at the images right there. Relentless. And think about all the all-pros he was part of back on the teams he was. Deacon Jones, Ray Nitschke, Dick Buckus, Jerry Stovall, Willie Wood, Carl Eller, and Bob Brown. For my money, I'm taking Willie Davis all day long. And then the most greatest factor here, we know Vince Lombardi is considered one of the top 3 coaches ever in National Football League history. Well, anyone that knows Vince Lombardi, he was a guy that didn't really mince his words. He was going to tell you like it was. It might have hurt your feelings. He voted Willie Davis as captain. Mic drop. Back to you, Mr. Harper LeBel.
Yeah, he's a tough man now. Ray Nitschke said that there was one game that they were playing where Willie's bone was sticking out of one of the fingers, and they had to reattach it. It was dislocated. He had broken the bone, and then they taped it up, and they put him right back in the ball game. So tough as nails, never missed a game. Here are some of the stats that you may want to know. 162 games, and he didn't miss any of them with the Green Bay Packers. He has 21 fumble recoveries, which is still a team record with the Packers. 5 times he was a first-team All-Pro. He was a second-team All-Pro once. He went to 5 Pro Bowls, obviously, and he was on the NFL All-Decade team in the 1960s. Here's what amazes me. 5 times, right? He's got 5 rings. 1960, 61, 62, and 65, 6, and 7. All of those years, he was an NFL champion. And back then, this is right when there wasn't a merger yet. All right, so it was the NFL, the Cleveland Browns, and Jim Brown, and Otto Graham, and those great teams, and it was the Packers. The 2 of them would be champions one year after another. So he has 2 Super Bowl rings, Super Bowl 1 and 2, and then you see the pictures there. The one on the right, in the middle at the top, that's against the old Philadelphia Eagles. Great picture of Willie, and imagine having to throw around that guy. Amazing. Walter Camp, Player of the Year, Man of the Year, 1986, and he was given his gold jacket in 1981 into the NFL Hall of Fame. He is listed as number 69 in the top 100 players of all time. And if you don't mind, Vincent, any other thoughts that you have? I was going to do some of the academic successes that he has and post-career accomplishments, but anything else that you want to mention regarding his playing career?
All I can say is that he won in 10 seasons with Green Bay. He won 5 championships. And the most important part, I'm going to let you handle it, as far as his academics. All I know is this. I have a lot of relatives that live in the city of Chicago. To get a master's degree out of the University of Chicago, you got to be really special. Back to you, Mr. LeBel.
Absolutely. And here's another thing that Willie did during his career. I think he was able to calculate, right? He studied math when he was at Grambling and calculate his career longevity. And it doesn't matter who you are, even if you're Tom Brady and you play over 20 years. I played with Morton Anderson. He played 25 years. At one point or another, you're going to have a birthday, and it's going to be the last one that you have while you're still a player. You're always going to find somebody younger, always going to find somebody that's cheaper, it's easier to deal with. You name it, it doesn't matter. But at one point or another, your career ends. And Willie thought about that and started working on his master's. Vincent mentioned the University of Chicago. It's the Booth School of Business. And in 1968, he ended up getting his master's degree from that. Tough college to get into, let alone get a graduate degree from. So congratulations for Willie thinking ahead. He certainly did that and was able to maximize it. There's a lesson in my life that I learned in college when I was a freshman. And I'll sum it up just by saying this. Learn to take advantage of it rather than it take advantage of you. I tell people that have kids that are in college or they're going to school, and I go, have them take advantage of the school rather than the school take advantage of them. That can apply to your business, your personal life. It's not taking advantage in a wrong way. Listen to me, folks. I'm just saying, take the classes that you want to take. Develop the relationships with the people that you want to do. Take advantage of those rather than letting them take advantage of you. So there's a good and positive way to do something like that, and Willie certainly did. Kappa Alpha Phi Psi, he was a member of that fraternity, and he was a board member of these following organizations: Marquette University, Alliance Bank, Dow Chemical from 1988 to 2006, Johnson Controls from 1991 to 2006, Kmart, LA Gear, Manpower, Metro Goldwyn Mayer, yes, the TV and movie production studio, MGM Mirage, the hotel chains, Sara Lee, Schlitz Brewing, Wycor, director, board of director. He's on the board of all of those organizations. How do you get into that? You have to develop relationships with people. You have to help them be better with you than they are without you. That's part of what I will remember. He has children and grandchildren that have been in the movie industry. What an amazing career that he had. He was also a member of the Green Bay Packers board, getting back to the NFL, from 1994 till 2005. And the Packers were certainly a better organization with him than without him. So, Vincent, before we say goodbye, what else do we need to say about the greatness of William Delford Davis?
Okay, remember he owned 5 radio stations, so he's very heavy in the radio business. And what I'm going to take from him is his son, Dwayne, is a professional actor, Dwayne Davis, and he had a grandson, Wyatt Davis, who was an All-American offensive guard at the Ohio State Buckeyes. What more can you say about any individual? A guy coming out of a small town of Texarkana, Arkansas, all the challenges he had, going to Grambling State University, then serving 2 years in the military, then getting traded and going to an organization. A lot of people don't remember this, but the Green Bay Packers, before Vince Lombardi got there, was an organization that was losing. And for him to go into that organization, play under 2 of the greatest coaches in this great game of football, and Eddie Robinson and Vince Lombardi, I think Willie Davis had an outstanding life. Many blessings and pleasures and honor to the Willie Davis family. Back to you, Harper. My final
words. Absolutely. An amazing man. His legacy through his children, his grandchildren, obviously his wife. He did it all. There may have been a mistake or two along the way, but we recognize the greatness that he was known for, a finalist for the commissioner of the National Football League. The year that they gave it to Paul Tagliabue, Willie Davis was one of the final 4 that was considered for that job. So his contribution to football and to humankind and our world as we know it was certainly profound. We want to thank Willie Davis for everything that he did throughout his life. We want to honor that here at 100 Yards of Football, and we choose to do that. We give you about 20 minutes about each player 2 times a week. We want to thank you for tuning in and allowing us to be a part of your day. We thank you also for just tuning in and listening to us talk about some guys that we have great respect for and we want to honor along with you. So on behalf of Jeremiah Long, our producer, Vincent Turner, the host of the show, my name is Harper LeBel. We want to thank you for being a part of it. For 100 Yards of Football, our legends, Willie Davis Show, we want to thank you. Have a great day, everybody.